Greetings and welcome back to Doctor Who Revisited, where I go through every single episode of Doctor Who from 1963 all the way to 2023 and review them. And this one is a return to one of my favorite, if not my all-time favorite planet in Doctor Who, the monster of Peladon. So this picks up right from, well, not right from, but several years after the Curse of Peladon, which is just amazing and I love it. And this episode is slightly below Curse of Peladon, but it's still really, really good. I don't know what to tell you. I love this planet. I just love the lore and the history, the lived-in feel of this planet. I want to learn more about this planet. I want a full-on Doctor Who mini-series about the planet Peladon and all its many different rulers. I mean, it's a planet that has been revisited several times in other media, including Big Finish, but I just want on the TV side. I mean, it's Game of Thrones in Doctor Who, and I love it. And this episode, while it doesn't necessarily have the charm, or rather, shall we say, the first impression feel of the first episode, this episode really just takes everything established in the previous one and expands on it. We get to see more of the planet Peladon. We get to see more of the catacombs underneath the citadel, and we get to see more of the different classes of people on the planet, like the miners, and we get to see a few more members of the Galactic Federation, some that we didn't see the first time around. Sadly, most of them don't really last all that long, but I just wish we got to see more of this Galactic Federation with Alpha Centauri and the Ice Lords, or the Ice Warriors, or the Martians, to put it more kindly. But yeah, I wish we got to see more of the Federation. But I'm just glad we got to see more of Peladon. Now, this episode, very similar to the previous episode, Death to the Daleks, kind of takes place in the middle of something, right? Last time it was all about the space plague. This time around, it's all about talking about a war with Galaxy 5. And again, it's the large expansiveness of Doctor Who world, the Doctor Who universe, most of which we don't really get to see all that much, but it's still nice to think that there's a much wider, bigger, grander universe outside the episodes that we were seeing. And the majority of the plot of this episode takes place around trying to mine a mineral called trisilicate, which is what the most, if not all, of the weapons that the Galactic Federation uses in their war against the Galaxy 5. And this really just shows you how important resources are, and more importantly, resource locations are for war, especially when you're talking about a galactic war, where you need, if the planet's not necessarily actively participating on the offensive, you need supplies for this to supply the war. And it's something, and I love how in Doctor Who really just shows you the full face of what war is. War isn't just, on the front lines, guns are blazing and people dying on the front. No, sometimes there's on the back burner, stuff on the back burners, like supplies, like negotiations on certain planets. And Doctor Who just gives us all these different facets across all different forms of media and across all kinds of different planets and all kinds of different wars. So I really like that. But overall, while we're talking about a much larger, grander conflict, which is, of course, the war with Galaxy 5, all this really is just a political domestic dispute between the miners and the royals on the planet Peladon. Now, Queen Talira, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing the name. She's the daughter of King Peladon of Peladon, which of course was seen in the previous episode. And right off the bat, we're seeing a lot of similarities between her and her father, like the overprotective, overimposing Chancellor Ortron, sort of replacing Chancellor Hepesh after he passed away. So we still have that same element that was very much apparent in the previous episode, with the Chancellor essentially running the king or queen in this case, not really letting the king do or the queen do what needs to be done. But now we've got a different layer on top of it, because this time the ruler, the monarch, is a woman and not a man. And apparently, Peladon has a lot of dark, archaic laws about women's place in the world, I should say. And I really like that this episode is addressing that issue head on, especially when you have a companion character like Sarah Jane Smith, one of the most prominent feminist icons in Doctor Who, one of the most important women in Doctor Who history, a woman that really does stand up for women's rights, and she even straight up mentions women's lib in this episode, and I like that. I love that they're addressing serious issues like that, which were relevant back in the 70s when they made this episode, and even more relevant today in the 2020s. And I just love how incredibly progressive they were. Their mindsets were, their thinking processes were all the way back then, making this episode. And I just really love the fact that it kind of works for them. The eventually, after some much needed convincing by Sarah Jane Smith, the Queen actually steps up and asserts her dominance. I mean, she is the Queen, so it's natural that all people on the planet would obey her and be loyal to her. And I like that they're addressing that head on in this episode. I really like it a lot. As far as the rest of the plot, at first, I mean, it's a bit convoluted. One of the reasons why I don't like this episode as much as I love the previous Peladon episode is because there's a little less focus on actual Agador himself. I mean, we see Agador like twice all throughout this episode. I loved the two times we got to see Agador the Beast. Unfortunately, the second time he died, so that's a bit unfortunate. It's kind of a tragic ending for that character, but thankfully, Big Finish kind of sorted it out. It's like, oh, it wasn't really a one-off thing. It was a female Agador which was pregnant and gave birth to another Agador. So there is a continuing of the lineage of Agador, but for the most part, they're kind of using Agador as a weapon. Also, the idea of Agador as a weapon in this episode, with of course the projection of the statue of Agador and the heat beam that disintegrates people. And it's another way of showing us how belief systems and religions can be used against the people who firmly believe it, and how and its effect on these superstitious folk like the Peladonians. And another thing that I really like is how for about half the story, the different episodes of the story, the Peladonians are kind of divided between the lower class and the upper class. The miners are trying to conquer the royals and the nobles of court, trying to take them hostage, trying to fight off the queen's guards. And as soon as the Ice Warriors show up and start asserting their dominance on the planet, forcing the queen to do what they want, they all suddenly drop everything that happened, and they're all standing united, the lower class and the upper class, standing side by side together, and even coming up with plans by the Doctor and Sarah Jane, of course, to fool the Ice Warriors into thinking that they're actually working for them. And then you see the miners and the guards fighting off the Ice Warriors together. I like that. It's always great to see these people who used to be divided are uniting to fight the common enemy. And I really like that aspect of the story. Now, as for the Ice Warriors, at first, it's kind of disappointing to see them as the villains. Again, and I love the Ice Warriors, especially as villains. Don't get me wrong, but I love them as a species. I like them as a race. And the previous Peladon episode really showed a different side of these Ice Warriors. Is that no, they're not all bad guys. They're incredibly honorable people, and they can be reasoned with. They had some of their dark times, and they sort of became more diplomatic, more intelligent, more clever. and then these guys are just bad guys again. But it's established very firmly in the episode that not all Ice Warriors are like that. They're a splinter group essentially. That they want things to go back to the way they used to be, the days of blood and warmongering and whatever. And conveniently, the one human guy is out on their side for the probably the most exploited human sin in all of Doctor Who, greed. And yeah, it's very fitting for both the Ice Warrior's nature in this episode and the human nature with Eckersley. That's the guy's name. So yeah, it's very fitting for both of these races to be villains operating on those specific impulses that are very prominent in both their species. But yeah, I think I said just about all I can from this episode. Again, I really like it. I love anything to do with Peladon. This episode's slightly less striking than the first one, but again, as I mentioned, the first one just had that first impression gut punch that it had, and this one, just it expands upon the aspects of the planet that were introduced in the previous one. So, yeah, it's a really good episode, and I wish we got to see more of Peladon in the classic series, but unfortunately, this is the last we're ever going to see of the planet in live action. Unless, of course, Rosalie Davis decides to take us back to that planet, and I would not be opposed to that. In fact, quite the opposite. Give me more Peladon all day long. That's it for my review on this episode. Thank you all for watching. If you have, let me know what you think about it, and I will see you some other time. Goodbye. Hi there. Thank you for watching the video. And if you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and tell your friends. I'll see you next time.